Oh, I love it. I love it when I'm right, which is, 99.9% of the time, obviously. I spent a full half hour on Thursday's show railing about a hit piece done about me by Crosscut, which is now called Cascade PBS. And to my utter surprise, unbelievably, they agreed to issue several corrections. This segment is brought to you by Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. Some patients like me can lose 20 to 30 pounds in a month or two. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at eastsideweightlossclinic.com. So on Thursday, I read for you from a piece headlined in Crosscut, Why Conservative Groups Are Banding Together to Dump Carbon Pricing. It said Redmond hedge fund manager Brian Haywood is spending millions to end cap and invest. He's got a web of organizations and Brandi Kruse backing him. Now, if you go to that article today, you will see this little clarifications at the bottom. They're calling it clarifications. I'm calling it corrections. This version of the story has been updated in several places to clarify Kruse's stand on these issues and to make it clear that her podcast sells ads to Project 42 and does not have any other financial relationship with the organization. So here's the gist of the Cascade PBS story. I'm sorry, I always call it Crosscut because they kind of changed to Cascade PBS. The general gist of it was, and I knew this was going to be a hit piece from day one, that their reporter came to Bellevue, did an interview with me, barely wrote anything I said down. I think was surprised I even agreed to do an interview. Nicole was telling me she got the impression he just wanted me to say no so he could go and write his story. But I'm like, hell no, I'll go meet him. Talked to him, gave good points, didn't write hardly any of it down, sent him follow-up emails, never responded. But one thing he kept saying to me over and over during this interview off the bat was, this is going to be contentious. My questions essentially are going to be contentious. And he kept saying that. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I was a journalist for many years. Like, I ask contentious questions of people all the time, but I never prefaced it with, I'm going to be an ass to you, So that just told me that he had this narrative in his mind and he was there to like kind of pick a fight with me and not really get my perspective on things. But the whole gist of the article he's writing is conservatives. There's this dark, shadowy web of conservatives who are trying to get the Climate Commitment Act repealed. Okay, so yeah, I am trying to get the Climate Commitment Act repealed. No one's paying me to do that. I'm doing it because it's a crap policy that makes the working class more poor, and it's a policy Jay Inslee is incapable of telling the truth about. He lies and says, oh no, that's not increasing gas prices, and the media didn't call him out on it for a year. So yeah, I am absolutely on board and will team up with anyone who wants to help repeal the Climate Commitment Act when Initiative 2117 goes before voters in November. But the suggestion here is that we're up to something nefarious. That you have this web of organizations and they're paying us on the podcast to oppose it, to call for State Senator Mark Elias to be recalled over his lies about the CCA, and that I'm not doing that just because that's my opinion. And I have a show where I say my opinion, but I'm doing it because Future 42, one of our wonderful show sponsors, must be paying me to do it, which is just not true. It's just demonstrably false. So what I thought would be fun, just so you can realize the extent to which words can be manipulated, and you guys know this because I think you're very savvy news consumers, but the extent to which words can be manipulated to fit a certain agenda and how just small changes even can dramatically change the appeal of the story, I thought we'd go through some of the corrections, shall we? Okay, let's do it. So one of the big corrections, and these are things I asked for, by the way. They didn't just correct it because they watched my show and they were like, well, Brandi's mad, so we should issue some corrections. No, I sent their editor, and I'll give Donna Blankenship a lot of credit. She responded right away. I got no pushback from her. She CC'd the reporter, who hadn't responded to me when I texted him saying, I want some corrections. Who do I reach out to? She responded right away. And they corrected everything that I said should be corrected because I had all the receipts for it. So I'm going to give her a lot of credit for that. You get things wrong in journalism. Whether you're willing to correct it says a lot about you. Now, I would argue that this entire story is flawed and the premise of it is flawed, but I'm going to give at least the editor credit in making the corrections happen. So one of the corrections I asked for is their insinuation that I'm somehow backing Brian Haywood. Now, I like Brian Haywood with Let's Go Washington, who's been paying for these initiatives, but I'm not supporting the initiatives because I am buddies with Brian Haywood. I don't care who's running the initiatives. I'm supporting the initiatives because they're all common sense. They're all good ideas. and they reverse bad policies. So one of the corrections they made, they said he's got, speaking to Brian Haywood, he's got a web of organizations and Brandi Kruse backing him. And they changed that to the initiative has a web of organizations and Brandi Kruse backing it. And that's important. And I know it seems small, but think about what they're trying to insinuate, that Brian Haywood, this rich hedge fund manager, again, it all plays into their overall narrative that we're being paid to do this. Brian Haywood, this rich hedge fund manager, he's got Brandi Kruse backing him. No, I'm not backing Brian. I like Brian. I support what he's doing. I'm backing the initiative because it's bad policy. Let's move on, shall we? This gets to the heart of their claim without saying it, right? It's a vague insinuation, and then they leave their readers to fill in the pieces, which is something the media does very, very well. So their original story said Project 42, through its communications branch, does financially support conservative political podcaster Brandi Kruse, an outspoken critic of Cap and Invest. No, they don't financially support our show. It sounds like they're just giving us money. They buy ads on the show. So that's what they corrected it to, that Project 42 buys ads on Brandi Kruse's conservative political podcast, and they added this line. But just like with any other journalism organization, buying ads does not buy any control of the content. They added that line because basically I told them to. Because I pointed out that Crosscut has sponsors such as Amazon, Alaska Airlines, the ACLU. And when I pointed that out, does that mean that Crosscut, and you can leave that up, Nicole, does that mean that Crosscut is bought and paid for by the ACLU and by Amazon? I don't think so. So you're criticizing me for one of my sponsors, suggesting I can't possibly be unbiased about it when you do the same thing. So they added that line, which I thought was very good. They also corrected this. They said I called for State Senator Marco Lias to be recalled by voters because we disagree about how revoking the Cap and Invest program will affect funding for transportation projects. I told them no. I don't call for politicians to be recalled because I simply disagree with them. Otherwise, I'd spend every waking hour calling for politicians to be recalled. I said I'm doing it because he lied, and here's where he used his government Twitter account to lie to voters, to fearmonger them about what would happen if the CCA gets repealed. So they changed that line to that I've called for him to be recalled by voters because I believe that he has used his government social media account to lie. See the difference there? Yeah, I don't go out on a limb and call for politicians to be recalled simply because I am just so thin-skinned and I just cannot handle disagreement. No, the man's a liar, and I'll say today he should be recalled for doing that. Let's do one more, shall we? I'm just having the best time. It says in another podcast, it went into these things that it says I got wrong about the CCA and the Climate Commitment Act money, which I didn't get wrong. In another podcast, Kruse criticized the state's purchase of a 2,000-acre chunk of forest with $70 million in Cap and Invest money, saying even Franz opposed it, the Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary Franz. Never said that. I never said Hillary Franz specifically opposed that $70 million budget line item. What I did say, and what I provided them with video of before the story, is Hillary Franz giving a speech in November of 2023 where she said that closing down working forests is a dangerous idea if you think it's going to help the climate. And it actually leads to less carbon sequestration and makes those forests more susceptible to wildfires. So they changed that. They made it more specific. Kruse said even Franz disagreed with the idea that shutting down working forests will help the environment. You see the big difference there? In one side, they're calling me a liar, basically, saying I got something wrong. And in the other side, they're being more nuanced and saying, well, actually, Franz did say that. And then one more. In an interview, Kruse stood by her story. She did not contact Washington DNR prior to her story. Except I sent them the email of Nicole repeatedly reaching out to DNR. They had the email prior to writing that inaccurate line, so then they updated it. In an interview, Kruse stood by her story. She said she tried several times to get Franz on her show to discuss the issue, but did not succeed. And they didn't even have to say she said. We sent them the email. We did try to get her on several times. So you see how all of those corrections, and I didn't even ask for corrections on things that weren't about me. The story also talked about Future 42, Project 42, Citizen Action Defense Fund. I'm not going to ask for corrections to something that's not about me. That's not my business, right? Although I think there are some things in there that should be corrected still, but They corrected everything I asked them to correct. Now, there's the overarching problem with this story, and that gets to the bigger picture and not just me, bragging that I got these things corrected. When you look at this story, and a lot of the pushback against Brian Haywood and people who want to repeal the CCA in November, Jay Inslee sending out fundraising emails saying this is rich people who hate the climate, like Steve Gordon and Brian Haywood and Kemper Freeman, and shaming them for that. Has it been brought up at all that the no on 2117 side has raised far more money from far richer people? You notice that if it's spent on the side that wants to repeal the CCA, evil. If it's Bill Gates donating to help stop the repeal, well, that's great. Great. Someone who's far richer than Brian Haywood. Multiple times richer. But that's completely acceptable. But God forbid conservatives in the state band together on anything and even try to put an ounce of the effort in that Democrats have put in over the years. And now you need outlets like Crosscut trying to say, that's shady, but it's not shady on this side. It's shady when a hedge fund manager gives $1 million of his own money to help voters repeal the CCA, but it's not shady when Bill Gates gives his own money to help keep it, to help keep your gas prices high, to help keep you poor. Like, this is crazy stuff. The other thing I pointed out, and I'll follow up with him about, is why aren't you asking the Seattle Times about their financial backers for their climate lab reporting? They have a whole entity at the Times, a whole team that covers the climate from the kind of climate change Jay Inslee perspective. And it's backed by very wealthy people on the left. No issues there. So it's complete double standard.